The title of this story is My Girlfriend Turned Down My Proposal, so I broke up with her and asked her to move out of my apartment. Before we get into it, I have one small favor to ask. If you like stories like this, please take a second to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, it really helps support the channel, and it makes sure you won't miss any future videos. With that out of the way, let's jump into the story. Hey, everyone. My name is Nathan. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and the last few weeks have been some of the hardest I've ever been through. A few weeks back, I asked my girlfriend of 4 years, Lauren, who's 27, to marry me. Things didn't just go differently than I expected, they completely fell apart. Even now, I still catch myself wondering how everything unraveled so fast. To give you a little background, Lauren and I first met at a small backyard barbecue through some mutual friends. We clicked almost immediately. We laughed at the same jokes, wanted the same things out of life, and talking with her always felt effortless. As the years passed, we built a life together that felt solid. We talked about everything that couples usually dream about. Marriage, having kids someday, buying our dream home, the whole picture. Lauren would light up whenever wedding-related topics came up, even if we weren't actually planning anything at the time. She'd send me links to engagement rings she liked or point out wedding venues whenever we happened to drive past one. She wasn't obsessed with it or anything, but it definitely seemed like she pictured that future with me. At least, that's what I believed. When our 4th anniversary rolled around this year, I decided it was finally time to make things official. I spent months planning the proposal because I wanted it to be something we'd both remember forever. I wasn't just trying to create a special moment for Lauren. I wanted it to be meaningful for both of us. Romantic planning has never really been my strong suit, so I asked my best friends, Ryan and Tyler, for help. We've known each other since college, and they were just as excited about the proposal as I was. Together, we planned every little detail. I booked a stay at a resort Lauren had mentioned wanting to visit years earlier. It cost more than I probably should have spent, but I honestly felt it was worth every dollar. Ryan and Tyler helped me choose the engagement ring. We went with a simple, timeless design because Lauren had never been into flashy jewelry. We also arranged a private dinner at the resort with candles, flowers, and everything you'd expect from a romantic proposal. Here's where things get a little more complicated. I didn't plan for it to be just the two of us. Lauren's close friends, Madison and Rachel, knew about the proposal too. The plan was for them to join us afterward with drinks so we could celebrate together. Ryan and Tyler were going to be there as well. It wasn't some huge party, just a small group of the people closest to us to make the night feel even more memorable. When the big day finally arrived, everything seemed to be going perfectly. Lauren was happy, relaxed, and smiling all day. We spent the afternoon enjoying ourselves while I quietly tried to keep my nerves under control. I was anxious, but mostly excited. When it was finally time for dinner, I got dressed, took a deep breath, and tried to act calm. Lauren looked absolutely beautiful that night, and I couldn't stop thinking about how lucky I was to have her. We arrived at the dinner setup, and everything looked exactly the way I'd imagined. Candles flickered around us, flowers decorated the table, and soft music played in the background. I gave a short speech, telling her how much she meant to me and how much I loved the life we'd built together. Then I dropped down on one knee, held out the ring, and asked her to marry me. That's the exact moment everything fell apart. She didn't say yes. She didn't even say no. She just stood there completely frozen. It felt like several minutes passed before she finally spoke. Nathan, I need more time. The entire atmosphere changed in an instant. I couldn't even process what I'd just heard. Our friends were all watching us, and I could literally feel every pair of eyes locked on me. I was embarrassed, confused, and honestly, completely crushed. Lauren immediately started apologizing. She kept saying she wasn't rejecting me, that she simply wasn't ready yet, and needed more time before making such a huge decision. By then, though, I wasn't really hearing anything she said. I was doing everything I could just to keep myself from completely falling apart in front of everyone. Ryan and Tyler tried cracking jokes to ease the awkwardness, but nothing could fix what had just happened. Madison and Rachel looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. Lauren continued apologizing, and I just kept nodding, pretending I was okay. The truth was, inside I was falling apart. We ended up leaving dinner early. The drive back to the hotel was painfully quiet. I spent the entire ride staring out the window, replaying every second of the proposal over and over in my mind. Lauren sat beside me without saying much, and I imagined she was lost in her own thoughts too. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her. Once we got back to the room, she tried explaining everything again. She told me she needed more time to think. She insisted it wasn't because of me and said she simply wasn't mentally prepared to make such a life-changing commitment. None of it made any sense to me. We'd spent years talking about marriage. She knew how serious I was about spending my life with her, and she'd always acted like she wanted exactly the same future. Finally, I looked at her and asked the question that had been eating at me. Do you actually want to marry me? She answered yes. But then she added that she just wasn't ready to say yes right now. To me, that answer felt like getting punched in the gut. In my mind, you either want to marry someone or you don't. It shouldn't be that confusing. For the rest of the trip, we hardly spoke. I wasn't just embarrassed for myself. I felt awful for involving all of our friends in what was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of our lives. Instead of becoming a beautiful memory, the entire night had turned into a disaster. Things didn't improve after we got back home either. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Was I the problem? Had I rushed things? Did I ignore signs that Lauren wasn't actually ready? I replayed our entire relationship over and over in my head, picking apart every conversation and every memory, trying to figure out if I'd missed something important. Meanwhile, Lauren acted like life had gone back to normal. She'd hand me a cup of coffee in the morning, ask how work was going, and try making casual conversation. But none of it felt real. It honestly felt like we were both pretending that the proposal had never happened. For a while, I didn't tell anyone about what had happened. Not my parents. Not the people I worked with. Nobody. The only people who knew were the friends who had witnessed it, and even with them, I avoided talking about it. I felt like a complete fool for believing everything in our relationship had been perfect when it clearly wasn't. Eventually, though, I decided to call my sister, Emily. She's always been the brutally honest one in our family. If she thinks you're wrong, she'll tell you without sugarcoating it, and if she thinks you're right, she'll back you up just as strongly. I figured if anyone could help me make sense of everything, it'd be her. I had no idea that talking to her was only going to leave me with even more questions. When I called Emily, I honestly didn't even know where to begin. Admitting what had happened felt humiliating, almost like I'd somehow failed. The second I said, "Hey, you got a minute?" she could immediately tell something was wrong. Without missing a beat, she asked, "What's going on?" So I told her everything. I told her about the proposal, Lauren freezing instead of answering, the painfully silent drive back to the hotel, and how strange things had been between us ever since we got home. By the time I finished talking, I realized I was pacing circles around my apartment with my heart pounding, almost like I was reliving the whole night all over again. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I honestly expected Emily to tell me I was blowing the whole thing out of proportion. Instead, she finally spoke. "Nathan, I don't want to scare you, but what Lauren did, that's a pretty big red flag." The moment she said that, I stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" I asked. Emily let out a long sigh before answering. "Look, Nathan, when a woman hesitates after a proposal, it's usually about more than just being nervous. Most of the time, there's something else behind it." I frowned. "Like what?" "Either she isn't completely sure about marrying you, or there could be someone else." The second she said those words, it felt like my stomach hit the floor. "Someone else? Are you seriously saying that?" I asked in disbelief. I couldn't wrap my head around it. We'd been together for 4 years. I'd stayed loyal, built a future with her, and finally worked up the courage to ask her to marry me. How could she possibly be thinking about someone else? "I'm not saying she's definitely cheating," Emily replied quickly. "I'm just asking you to think about it." She paused for a second before continuing. "Nathan, you've been together for 4 years. For years. She knew this proposal was coming eventually. It's not like you surprised her out of nowhere." She kept talking. "If she still isn't ready after all this time, then what exactly is she waiting for?" Her words landed harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't want to believe Lauren could be hiding something from me, but I also couldn't ignore how much Emily's explanation seemed to fit. For years, I believed Lauren and I had one of the strongest relationships I knew. Now I wasn't so sure anymore. "Maybe I just rushed things," I said, trying to defend Lauren. Or maybe trying to convince myself. Maybe she honestly needs time to process everything. "Nathan, seriously?" Emily replied, her voice growing firmer. "Do you actually believe that?" She reminded me that I'd been dropping hints for months. "You planned an entire trip around this proposal. If she truly wasn't ready, she had plenty of chances to tell you before you got down on one knee in front of everyone." As much as I hated hearing it, she had a point. Lauren had always been honest with me about what she wanted. At least, that's how it used to be. Lately, though, things had felt different. I started telling Emily about little things I'd ignored before. Lauren had been staying late at work more often. She'd been going out with her friends a lot more than usual. Her phone was almost always on silent. Back then, none of it had bothered me because I trusted her completely. But after hearing Emily's thoughts, every one of those little details suddenly looked suspicious. "I hate saying this," Emily continued, "but it sounds like classic girl code." "Girl code?" I repeated, completely confused. "It's when a woman avoids committing because she wants to keep her options open," Emily explained. "She's hesitant because she isn't completely sure you're the only future she wants." I didn't even know how to respond. The idea that Lauren might be keeping her options open drove me crazy. She wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my best friend, my partner, the woman I honestly believed I'd spend the rest of my life with. Thinking she might be hiding something that important from me made me feel physically sick. At the same time, I knew I couldn't accuse her of anything without evidence. What if Emily was completely wrong? What if Lauren was simply overwhelmed or scared? I don't know, Emily, I finally admitted. It feels wrong to start assuming the worst. She's never really given me a reason not to trust her. Hasn't she? Emily asked quietly. Think about the last few months. Has she been acting differently? I replayed everything in my head. The late nights. The weekends she spent away. The way she guarded her phone. Looking back, all those things suddenly seemed obvious. But when they were actually happening, I'd brushed every one of them aside. I trusted Lauren. More than that, I loved her. I didn't want to believe she was capable of hurting me. Maybe, I admitted after a long pause. But what am I supposed to do? Go through her phone? Follow her around? Spy on her? That just sounds ridiculous. No, Emily answered immediately. That's not who you are, and you shouldn't become that person. Then she added, but you do need to start paying attention. If something's really going on, sooner or later she'll make a mistake. I didn't want to hear any of that. What I wanted was for Emily to laugh it off and tell me I was overthinking everything. I wanted her to say Lauren simply needed more time and that everything would eventually work itself out. Deep down, though, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something really was off. After we hung up, I sat alone on my couch, staring at the engagement ring. It was still sitting inside the same little velvet box where I'd left it after the proposal. Untouched. I couldn't believe I'd been so certain everything between us was perfect when it clearly wasn't. What made everything even harder was the way Lauren started watching me afterward. It felt like she was constantly trying to read my face, almost as if she wanted to figure out what I was thinking before I actually said anything. Whenever we were in the same room, I could feel her looking at me. Every now and then she'd ask, "Are you okay?" But it didn't sound casual. It felt loaded, almost like she was searching for reassurance. At first, I barely answered. I was too hurt, too confused, and too frustrated to have another conversation about any of it. The more she kept trying to figure out how I felt, though, the more irritated I became. It wasn't just the questions themselves. It was the way she asked them. It felt like she already knew she'd hurt me and wanted me to make her feel less guilty. She'd make little comments that sounded almost apologetic. "You've been really quiet lately. I feel like we haven't talked much." One day she even looked at me and quietly said, "I hate that things feel so weird between us." I didn't even know what to say. Things didn't feel weird. They were weird. What made it worse was that she kept dancing around the real issue instead of talking about it directly. It honestly felt like she expected me to repair something she had broken. The next several days were miserable. Lauren acted as though everything had gone back to normal. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop analyzing every word she said and every little thing she did. If she told me she was meeting friends, I'd catch myself wondering if that was actually where she was going. If she came home late from work, I'd wonder whether she'd really stayed at the office. I hated thinking that way. Before all this, Lauren had always been caring, supportive, and loving. Now, every time I looked at her, all I could see was uncertainty. The hardest part wasn't even the proposal itself. It was not knowing. Not knowing whether Emily had been right. Not knowing whether Lauren was hiding something. Not knowing if I'd ever be able to trust her the same way again. I felt completely trapped, stuck in this strange limbo where nothing made sense anymore. I still loved Lauren. But ever since that awful proposal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was wrong. The longer those doubts stayed in my head, the more they slowly ate away at me. So let me ask all of you this. What would you do if you were in my position? Update 1. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented. I honestly never expected my story to get so much attention. Since my original post, things have become even more complicated. A few days after talking with Emily, I couldn't stop replaying our conversation. The whole girl code idea sounded ridiculous at first, almost like something someone had made up. But Emily wasn't the kind of person who threw out random theories without thinking them through. The way she explained it kept sticking in my mind. Before I knew it, I was overanalyzing everything Lauren had done over the past several months. I wasn't proud of myself for it. I honestly wished I could stop. Meanwhile, Lauren behaved like nothing had changed. She was still kind, still affectionate in the easy, familiar way she'd always been. But despite that, there was an invisible wall between us. Neither of us brought up the proposal. Neither of us mentioned the trip. And I wasn't about to be the one to reopen that conversation. Instead, I started paying closer attention. I began noticing things I hadn't noticed before. I started noticing that Lauren seemed attached to her phone more than ever. Anytime I happened to glance in her direction, she'd quickly lock the screen or turn it face down before I could see anything. It gave me a bad feeling. I also noticed little changes in the way she talked to me. Whenever I asked how her day had gone, she'd pause for a second before answering, then give me these short, rushed explanations that felt almost rehearsed. Even with all of that, I kept trying to be reasonable. I told myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe she still felt embarrassed about the proposal. Maybe everything had simply overwhelmed her, and she didn't know how to deal with it. Or maybe I was letting Emily get into my head and turning innocent things into something they weren't. Then everything changed. Emily sent me a text. I was sitting at work, pretending to answer emails even though I hadn't actually been concentrating on anything. My mind kept replaying the last few weeks over and over. Then my phone buzzed. "We need to talk about Lauren." I heard something. The moment I read it, my stomach dropped. Emily wasn't the kind of person who sent dramatic messages for no reason, so I knew this wasn't going to be good. I stepped outside the office and called her immediately. She got straight to the point. I was talking with one of my friends, and Lauren came up. Apparently, she's been spending a lot of time with some guy she works with. And I mean, a lot. For a few seconds, I couldn't even answer. My brain started connecting dots that hadn't existed just moments earlier. What exactly does that mean? I finally asked. Emily explained that her friend worked at Lauren's company, just in a different department. According to her, she'd seen Lauren eating lunch with this guy several times. On the surface, nothing looked inappropriate. Still, Emily's friend thought it seemed unusual because the two of them looked especially close. I honestly didn't know what to make of it. People have lunch with coworkers all the time. That doesn't automatically mean anything. But Emily's friend wasn't someone who made things up. She had a reputation for being honest and dependable. The more I thought about it, the harder it became to dismiss the whole thing as coincidence. That evening, I tried acting normal around Lauren. It was impossible. Every time her phone vibrated, I wondered if it was him. Every time she mentioned work, I caught myself wondering whether she was talking about that coworker. The next day, she casually mentioned she'd have to stay late because of a meeting. Normally, I would have just nodded without thinking twice. Instead, I felt this tight knot growing in my stomach. After Lauren went to bed that night, I stayed awake for hours thinking about everything Emily had told me. If I confronted Lauren, what would I even say? Asterisk. Hey, my sister's friend says you've been spending time with some guy from work. Is there something you're hiding? Asterisk. The more I thought about it, the more ridiculous it sounded. It felt like I was building accusations out of rumors. But at the same time, I couldn't simply ignore what I'd heard. The next day, I called Emily again. I needed more information. Something concrete. Anything that would help me understand what was really going on. At first she hesitated. It almost sounded like she regretted telling me anything at all. Eventually, though, she admitted there was something else. Her friend had seen Lauren and that same coworker at a coffee shop after work. That detail hit me much harder than I expected. It wasn't just any coffee shop. It was the place Lauren and I used to visit all the time when we first started dating. There still wasn't any proof that she'd done something wrong. But emotionally, it felt personal. It felt like a place that belonged to the two of us had somehow become part of someone else's story. A story I wasn't included in. I couldn't stop second-guessing myself. Should I have noticed these things sooner? Should I have asked questions months ago instead of brushing everything aside? Maybe Emily's theory about girl code wasn't as ridiculous as I'd first thought. Maybe it explained something I simply didn't want to accept. By the time the weekend arrived, I felt like I was slowly losing my grip. Lauren wasn't openly cold toward me. She still smiled. She still asked how my day had gone. But something felt missing. There was a distance between us that I couldn't explain. It was almost like she was going through the motions instead of genuinely being present. On Sunday, Emily texted me again. You need to talk to her. If she's hiding something, she won't admit it unless you force the conversation. I stared at the message for a long time. The problem was, I didn't know how to push without crossing a line. I didn't want to become the kind of guy who accused his girlfriend of cheating based on rumors and assumptions. But I also couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to make a decision. I'll keep everyone updated. Hashtag update too. Hey, everyone. First, I want to thank all of you for the support and advice after my last update. I've spent the last several days reading your comments and trying to process everything that had happened. After thinking it through, I decided to do what most of you suggested. I was going to confront Lauren. But before I get to that conversation, here's what happened leading up to it. A few days after Emily's text, I'd reached my breaking point. The tension inside our apartment had become unbearable. Meanwhile, Lauren kept moving through her daily routine as if nothing had changed. As if rejecting my proposal hadn't completely shaken our relationship. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I wasn't willing to sit there feeling like some kind of backup option while she figured out whether I was good enough. For weeks I'd replayed that proposal in my head. I kept seeing myself on one knee, opening my heart to her. And then I'd remember the look on her face. It wasn't the expression of someone excited to start a future together. It looked more like I'd asked her for some huge favor. The hesitation itself wasn't even the worst part anymore. It was what that hesitation represented. After 4 years together, she still wasn't sure about me. We'd built an entire life together. How much more time could someone possibly need to decide whether I was the person they wanted? To me, it just didn't make sense. And now she seemed distant, quiet, almost like she genuinely had no idea why I was upset. That night, after dinner, we were both sitting at the table. Lauren was scrolling through her phone like she usually did. She looked completely absorbed in whatever was on the screen. I decided I wasn't going to wait for the perfect moment. There wasn't going to be one. This is it, I told myself. We need to talk, I said, leaning toward her. She looked up, clearly surprised. About what? I took a breath and asked the question that had been eating at me. Are you seeing someone else? Her eyes widened immediately. Slowly, she placed her phone on the table, almost like she was trying to buy herself a few extra seconds. What are you talking about? She asked. Why would you even think that? Because nothing about us feels normal anymore, I replied, unable to hide the frustration in my voice. You've been pulling away ever since the proposal. You've shut me out. And now it feels like you're waiting for someone better, or maybe for something better to come along. If that's what's happening, I deserve to know. The expression on her face immediately hardened. You seriously think I'd cheat on you? Maybe not physically, I answered, crossing my arms. But let's not pretend that coworker of yours doesn't exist. Emily told me about the coffee shop. You never mentioned spending time with him. So why didn't you? Lauren let out a slow, frustrated breath, clearly trying to stay calm. Because it isn't a big deal, she said. So we're working together on a project, Lauren replied. That's all this is. Then why keep it from me? I asked, leaning closer. If it's completely innocent, why didn't you ever mention it? I wasn't hiding anything, she shot back. I just didn't think I had to tell you every little detail about my job. That's not what this is about, Lauren, I said, unable to keep my voice from getting louder. The real issue is that I've felt like I'm the only one fighting to keep this relationship alive, and I'm exhausted. I took a deep breath before continuing. If this coworker really doesn't matter, fine. I'll accept that. But you still didn't say yes when I asked you to marry me. You asked for more time. Do you have any idea how humiliating that felt? I stood there believing I'd planned one of the happiest moments of our lives, only to hear that you weren't ready. I wasn't ready, she answered defensively. And I told you that from the beginning. It had nothing to do with another guy. I just needed time to think. Think about what? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to decide whether you even want to be with me. And if that's the truth, then just tell me. Don't keep me hanging around while you figure out what you really want. I'm not stringing you along, she insisted. I'm trying to sort out everything going through my head, but you're turning this into something it isn't. Don't try to make me question what I've been seeing, I replied coldly. You've been pulling away from me for weeks. So if it isn't because of that guy, then tell me what it is. I'm tired of constantly guessing. Lauren stood up and folded her arms across her chest. You really want to know why I hesitated? She asked. Fine. I hesitated because marriage is a huge commitment. It's permanent, and I honestly wasn't sure I was ready to take that step. It wasn't because of you. It wasn't because of anyone else. It was because of me. I heard every word she said, but instead of making me feel better, they only made me feel worse. I stood up and looked her straight in the eyes. So after 4 years together, you're telling me you're still not sure about us? That's not what I mean, she said quickly. Nathan, I love you. I really do. I just wasn't ready for that moment. Well, I was, I answered sharply. I honestly believed we wanted the same future. I never would have proposed if I thought for even a second that you didn't feel the same way. It only took me 6 months to know I wanted to spend my life with you. I waited years because I wanted you to reach that point in your own time. And now I'm questioning everything. I'm wondering whether you actually see a future with me, or whether I'm just the safe guy you're keeping around while you decide if something better comes along. The expression on Lauren's face immediately changed. She looked hurt, but I wasn't ready to back down. You've made me feel like I'm not enough, I continued. Like I'm just filling a space in your life until you figure out what you really want. I can't keep living like this, Lauren. I deserve more than that. I never wanted you to feel that way, she said quietly. But that's exactly how you've made me feel, I answered. And now I have to decide whether I can even stay in a relationship where I don't feel like I'm your first choice. For the first time that night, I saw real fear in her eyes. Nathan, she said softly, you are my choice. I've just been confused. I shook my head and cut her off. I understand that's how you feel. But here's the difference. I'm not confused. I know exactly what I want. I want to be with someone who's certain about me. I want someone who doesn't need extra time to decide whether I'm worth committing to. If you can't honestly be that person, then I don't know why we're still doing this." Lauren didn't answer. She just stood there silently, looking guilty, frustrated, and completely lost. The silence between us stretched on until it almost became unbearable. Finally, I stepped back. "I'm giving you some time to think," I told her. "But I'm not waiting forever. If you can't give me a real answer soon, one that tells me you're completely committed, then this relationship is over." With that, I walked away and headed into the bedroom so I could clear my head. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had finally taken back some control over my own life. Whether Lauren chose to stay or not, I wasn't willing to keep feeling like someone's backup plan. Whatever happened next, it was going to happen on my terms. Hashtag final update. Hey, everyone. A lot of you have been asking what happened after my last update, so I figured I'd let you know. Looking back, I'm not proud of how emotional that argument became. Still, I don't regret finally saying what had been building inside me for so long. I'd spent weeks, maybe even months, keeping all that frustration bottled up. The proposal, her hesitation, the emotional distance afterward, the constant doubt hanging over our relationship. Eventually, I reached a point where I couldn't ignore any of it anymore. Asking her directly about the coworker was something I knew I was going to do sooner or later. The truth is, though, the coworker wasn't even what bothered me most. What hurt me the most was her uncertainty. Her uncertainty about marriage, about our future, about us. I wasn't asking her to get married the next morning. I just needed to know we were walking toward the same future together. When she said she wasn't ready, all I heard was that she wasn't ready for me. After sitting alone for a while, I realized I needed another opinion. I didn't want to call Emily again. Instead, I texted Ryan. He'd been there during the proposal and had seen everything happen firsthand. "Hey, can we talk? I could really use some advice." Ryan had always been the kind of friend who told you the truth, even when it wasn't easy to hear. At that moment, that's exactly what I needed. A few minutes later, he called. I stepped out onto the balcony so we wouldn't wake Lauren, although after our argument, I doubted she was sleeping anyway. I told him everything. I explained how Lauren had reacted during the proposal. I told him about how distant she'd become afterward. Then I walked him through the conversation we'd just had. Ryan listened quietly the entire time without interrupting me once. Honestly, that alone helped. When I finally finished talking, he let out a slow sigh. "Nathan, I'm going to be honest with you. I think you're doing the right thing by standing up for yourself. If she's still unsure after 4 years together, that's a serious issue. I understand marriage is a huge commitment. But after all this time, she should at least know whether she wants to take that step with you. If she's still hesitating, you can't just pretend it doesn't matter." I nodded automatically, even though he couldn't see me over the phone. "I know," I admitted. "It's just hard. I don't want to throw away everything we've built together." "I get that," Ryan replied. "But you also don't want to spend years waiting for someone who's never completely committed. You deserve someone who's all in." After we hung up, I walked back into the living room. Lauren was still sitting on the couch. She held a blanket tightly against herself, almost like it was protecting her from whatever was coming next. Her phone still sat untouched on the coffee table while the television cast soft light across her face. When she noticed me, she looked up nervously. Her eyes searched mine, almost like she already knew this conversation would decide everything. For weeks I tried giving her space. I tried understanding her hesitation. I tried being patient, but I couldn't keep living like that. "We need to talk," I said quietly. She gave a small nod, twisting the edge of the blanket between her fingers. "I know," she answered in a soft voice. I sat down across from her, taking a slow breath and trying to stay as calm and reasonable as I could. "Lauren," I began. "Lauren," I began. "I've tried to be patient. I've given you space. I've given you time, and I've done everything I could to understand what happened between us. But I can't keep doing this anymore." I took a slow breath before continuing. "Ever since the proposal, you've been pulling away from me. I've tried to see things from your perspective. I've made excuse after excuse because I wanted to believe we'd get through this." I looked directly at her. "But it doesn't even feel like you're fighting for us anymore." She stayed quiet. Her eyes never left the blanket she was holding in her lap. "I need an honest answer," I said, my voice growing tighter. "Are you still committed to this relationship or not? Because I can't keep waking up every morning wondering if you're waiting for someone else to come along." "It's not like that," she replied quickly, finally meeting my eyes. "Then tell me what it is," I shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're keeping me around while you figure out what you really want. I can't live like that anymore." She swallowed hard. "Nathan," she whispered, "I don't know how to tell you this." "Then just say it," I answered sharply. "Whatever it is, just tell me. I'm tired of guessing. I'm tired of feeling like I'm playing some game I never agreed to." She hesitated for a few seconds before finally speaking. I've been seeing someone. Her voice was so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined it. For a moment, I just stared at her. Then the meaning of those words finally hit me. What? I asked. She looked at me with tears already forming in her eyes. I never planned for it to happen, she said quickly. It just happened. And then I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. That was the moment I completely lost my composure. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, my voice rising. So instead you went behind my back. You let me plan a proposal. You watched me get down on one knee. And instead of telling me the truth, you told me you needed more time. Do you even hear yourself? I'm not with him, she said desperately. I'm not even sure about him either. That's the problem. I don't know what I want anymore. You don't know what you want, I said as I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. After 4 years together? After everything we've built? You still don't know? Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? She flinched, but I couldn't stop. I was ready to spend the rest of my life with you, I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. I was planning our future while you were busy questioning whether someone else might make you happier. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? I never wanted any of this, she cried. I didn't mean for things to get this far. But they did, I interrupted. You made choices. You let this happen. And then you came home every day pretending everything was normal while our relationship was falling apart behind my back. I'm sorry, she whispered through tears. Sorry? I repeated bitterly. You think saying you're sorry changes any of this? Does it erase the lies? Does it erase the fact that you kept me in the dark while you were emotionally invested in someone else? She couldn't answer. She just sat there crying. I can't keep doing this, I finally said, my voice much calmer now. You say you're not even sure about him. Fine. But the fact that there was another person for you to compare me to tells me everything I need to know. Nathan, please, she said, standing and reaching toward me. We can fix this. I'll stop seeing him. I'll do whatever it takes. I took a step backward. No, Lauren. You don't get to make that decision now. You don't get to choose me only after you've already risked losing me. Her face crumbled. I forced myself to say the words I'd been avoiding. I need you to move out. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Nathan, please. You don't have to do this. I shook my head. No. You already made your decision. You made it the moment you decided I wasn't enough. You made it when you invited someone else into what was supposed to be our relationship. So don't stand here acting like I'm the one ending this. You ended it long before today. Please pack your things and leave. She looked at me for another moment before silently nodding. Without saying another word, she walked into the bedroom. I stood alone in the living room while I listened to drawers opening, closets closing, and bags being packed. Every sound hurt, but I never changed my mind. Eventually, she came back with her belongings. She stopped at the front door and looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't answer. I simply opened the door. After she walked out, I closed it behind her, locked it, and leaned against it as everything finally sank in. The apartment felt incredibly quiet, but for the first time in weeks. The silence actually felt peaceful. That night, Lauren was no longer part of my life. Later, I called my sister Emily. I wanted her to know she'd been partly right. It wasn't the co-worker we'd been wondering about. It turned out to be a completely different man. Looking back now, the whole situation feels almost unbelievable. After that, I told her everything. I explained Lauren's confession, how she'd admitted she'd been involved with someone else, even though she claimed it hadn't become serious. I also told Emily I'd ended the relationship because I refused to stay with someone who treated me like an option instead of a partner. She was shocked at first. Then she simply said, "You did the right thing. You deserve someone who chooses you without hesitation." A few days later, I got an unexpected phone call from Lauren's sister, Sophie. She asked me what had happened between us. I told her the entire story. I explained the proposal, Lauren asking for more time, her confession, and why I decided to end the relationship. To my surprise, Sophie didn't defend her sister. Instead, she sighed and said, "I'm really sorry, Nathan. You didn't deserve any of that. Lauren's been lost for a while. I hope she figures herself out someday. But I honestly think you made the right decision." Since then, I've been trying to focus on rebuilding my own life. One of the first things I did was sell the engagement ring. Keeping it around felt like holding on to one of the worst memories I've ever had. The money is sitting in my savings account now. I'd rather invest in my future than stay attached to my past. Healing hasn't been easy. There are still days when I replay everything in my head and wonder if I could have done something differently. But when I really think about it, I know this wasn't my failure. Lauren made her own choices. Her uncertainty belonged to her. It wasn't a reflection of my value as a person. I'm not ready to start dating again. And honestly, that's okay. Right now, my priority is healing, moving forward, and rebuilding the life I want. To everyone who's followed this story from the beginning, thank you. Your advice, encouragement, and different perspectives helped me find the strength to stand up for myself when I needed it most. If you're ever in a relationship where you're constantly questioning whether you're truly wanted, listen to your instincts. You deserve someone who's completely committed to you. Someone who chooses you without hesitation. Walking away is painful. Sometimes it's one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make. But every once in a while, letting go is the only path that leads to something better. Life is unpredictable, and I'm still figuring mine out. For now, I'm choosing to move forward one day at a time. Here's to new beginnings.